Many parts of the Great Lakes carry strange tales about ghosts and lost ships. One area is off of Kingston, known as Deadman Bay, and lying within the bay is Cedar Island. Two young women who were camping on the island had a very strange encounter. They were walking along the shore when they noticed a woman standing near the tower. The woman seemed to be scanning the horizon, searching for something. The first thing they noticed was her clothing, which seemed to be from at least 100 years ago. The woman finally looked at the two campers and simply vanished into thin air. The poor women quickly fled the island for good. Cedar Island has a very well-known documented ghost story going back to the 1840s. It was Irish stonemasons during the potato famine that were working on a gunnery or Cathcart tower on the island. Robert James was a young Irish stonemason who had arrived from Ireland to begin work on the tower. He was well respected amongst his workers and the townspeople of Kingston. The stonemasons worked 6 days a week. On their day off, they would arrive in Kingston and stay in barracks or local inns. It was during one of his days off that Robert went into Kingston and met a local innkeeper's daughter named Elizabeth. Robert fell in love at first sight, and Elizabeth did the same. The father thought Robert made an excellent suitor, and shortly thereafter the two were engaged to be married. Knowing he had a bright future, Robert worked tirelessly on the tower. And meanwhile, Elizabeth waited and waited for that wonderful day when the two would be wed. Yet tragedy lurked in the form of a freak storm. The men unwisely continued finishing their task before leaving for Kingston. They waited too long. A storm was quickly brewing in Deadman's Bay. They all jammed into one boat. The overloaded vessel and the rough water was a determining factor for the death of most of the men. The boat capsized, and few survivors were ever found. But Robert wasn't one of them. Search boats were sent out to find the survivors. Unfortunately, Robert wasn't one of the lucky ones. Many of the bodies were located in the bay. However, the tide returned to take the bodies back out, never to be found again.
To this day, we still believe that there are some in the water, perhaps still down at the bottom, have never made it to their homes or their beloveds. And this bay, which was called Hamilton Cove until then, has forever since been known as Deadman Bay.
Poor Elizabeth refused to accept the news of the death of Robert. She continued to walk down to the shoreline and gaze out over the water, waiting for his return. Although he would never return. Grief-stricken, Elizabeth refused to eat. Eventually, she perished of a broken heart. A new crew had to be hired to finish Cathcart Tower, and this is when the strange occurrences began. Workers soon reported seeing a woman on the island, especially around the tower. She seemed to be looking for something. Even soldiers stationed at Fort Henry would report seeing a mysterious woman walking along the Kingston shoreline, staring out across the bay at Cedar Island. Some campers even report seeing a man and woman together walking Cedar Island. Could it be Robert and Elizabeth? That they found one another? It would seem that the love between Robert and Elizabeth was so strong that they were united together after death in Deadman Bay.
Well, when you've got a place named Deadman Bay and you've got a legend of love and loss and so forth, again, you've set up a perfect situation for people who are inclined to want to believe in ghost stories to see things that will make them think they've seen the ghosts. If you were to change the name to Beautiful Bay and not tell anybody the legend, I'd be quite willing to bet that no one will ever report that particular ghost story, or probably they'll be unlikely to see any ghosts at all. But you set up the expectation with the name and the legend, and then the mind plays on any kind of ambiguous stimulus to fill in the details to give you your ghost.
There are other frightening legends that revolve around Deadman Bay. Sunken ships that still lie restless beneath the water. The sunken ships in Deadman Bay are so close to the surface that you can actually touch them with an oar. Many of the crews that perished with these ships in Deadman Bay were actually associated with what we call a press gang. They were young people that were taken off the streets by the British or United States officials. They were clobbered over the head, and when they awakened, they were employed in the service of Her Majesty's Navy. Legend has it that these press gangs would awaken from the depths of the water and attempt to employ anyone they could find on the surface. And legend continued to be told that when a person went missing or drowned in Deadman Bay, it was the press gangs that caught them.
There were stories that all the parents told of kids who'd wandered into the woods at night, had come too close to the bay, that the ships would, on a dark and stormy night, rise out of the bottom, and that the skeleton crews would come ashore and press gang anybody they found to haul them off, drag them into the waters, and they'd never be seen again.
Legend has it that children have actually lost their lives at night on the shore of Deadman Bay. The press gangs are awake and looking for souls.
I don't know if that was true or not, but we certainly were afraid of coming down here, especially on a dark or stormy night, as they say.
Parents all over the world make up stories to keep their kids away from situations that might be dangerous. You know, don't go down to the mill at night because the bogeyman might get you. It's a good way to keep children from going where they might get into trouble. And so the story of these ships just off the coast, 8 feet underwater, the story that the press gangs used to come out of them and get people and drag them underwater sounds like one of those stories. Oh, stay away from the water, kids. And here's a good way to make you stay away. We'll tell you a scary story. But it seems to be confirmed by these boats that have been obviously there for a long time and they're underwater.
I know that when I was a child growing up along these shores that we used to try to frighten each other or scare each other into coming down here and seeing how long one would last. Any one of us who did, I wasn't among them unfortunately, quite often came back with stories of strange whisperings, calls, splashes in the water, figures being seen along the shoreline, strange lights perhaps from lanterns of the press crew. I couldn't say myself, but then I wouldn't be down here after dark.
I think you have the combination of a cautionary tale plus some physical objects, the boats, that seem to make this thing very real and very interesting to people. But what data do you have? You've got some scuttled ships and a story, that's all. However, if people are in that area, especially late at night when we tend to be more anxious and we tend to be more prone to suggestibility, it's not surprising that someone or another from time to time will hear or see something that's interpreted as one of the members of the British press gang. There'll never be any photographs, of course, there'll never be any good evidence, but that will feed the story for the next generation. It'll go on and on.
Whether these legends originated from parents attempting to scare their children or by rum runners who are working the bay at night, the tales of Deadman Bay continue to this day, and this makes Deadman Bay one of the greatest Canadian ghost stories of all time.